My Playful Wife, Episode 12, The Diwali Visit, written by Mia. Diwali came late that year, pressing into November, the city going gold and loud for a week before the day itself. I have always loved the approach to Diwali more than the day. The day is a peak, and peaks are exhausting, but the week before, when the markets stay open past their hours and the sweet shops put on extra hands and every balcony in the colony begins, one by one, to outline itself in light, that week has a quality of accumulating promise that the day can only spend. Saloni and I had our rituals for it. We bought diyas from the same man we bought them from every year, a man who recognized us now, and set aside the unpainted clay ones she preferred. We strung the lights along the balcony railing on the same evening we always did, me on the stool holding the wire, her below directing me with the precision of a woman who could see the final composition in her head and would not settle for approximately. This year the rituals had an undertone of preparation because Piyush was coming and he was bringing Mira. He arrived with her on the 3rd. I had built up a picture of her in the weeks since Saloni first set a girl from his office, and the picture was wrong, as such pictures always are. I had imagined someone louder, someone who matched my brother's openness with openness of her own, the two of them a pair of unguarded people falling unguardedly toward each other. Mira was not that. Mira was 24 from Mysore, with a composed manner and a pair of sharp eyes and the particular quality of a person who does not miss things. An engineer, like Piyush. They had met on a project, she told us later, bonded first over a shared and specific hostility toward a kind of badly written code that apparently has a name and a long history of human suffering attached to it, and graduated from professional sympathy to something else over the course of 3 months. She was not beautiful the way Saloni was beautiful. I record this not unkindly. Saloni's beauty is the kind that rearranges a room, that makes people sit slightly differently when she enters, and it would be a strange and unfair standard to hold anyone else to. Mira was the other kind, the kind that becomes more interesting the longer you look at it, that reveals itself slowly, thought moving visibly just under the surface of the face, so that watching her listen was nearly as engaging as watching her speak. By the end of 4 days, I had stopped being able to remember why I'd thought, at the door, that she was ordinary looking. The face had reorganized itself in my understanding around the intelligence behind it. She shook my hand at the door with a firm, dry grip and said, "I've heard a lot about you." "All good things," Piyush said quickly. Too quickly. The reflex of a man who has spent some months managing what could and couldn't be said. "Some good things," she said and smiled, a slow smile, arriving a beat after you expected it, and then arriving completely. I liked her immediately. It was not a complicated liking. There are people you have to decide to like, and people the liking happens to you before you've decided anything, and she was the second kind. Saloni received her the way Saloni received everything, with a warmth that was wholly genuine and a competence that made the guest feel she had always been expected, that a place had been kept for her since before anyone knew her name. She had prepared the flat with care that went past the obligatory. Flowers, the good sheets on the guest bed, the small soaps she kept for occasions set out in the second bathroom. The kind of cooking that begins 2 days early, that fills the flat with the layered evidence of its own making, the marinades resting, the soaking lentils, the particular smell of a kitchen that has been told something important is coming. She had thought about what a young woman far from Mysore might miss, and made one thing toward it, a coconut-leaning dish that she set in front of Mira without comment on the first night and watched, for one unguarded second, to see land. It landed. Mira looked up at her with a flicker of surprise. The specific surprise of being read correctly by a near stranger, and something opened between them in that look that the next 4 days only widened. I watched all of this from slightly outside it, which was where I had learned to do my best watching. That first evening, while the two women were in the kitchen, talking about something I couldn't hear from the living room, their voices weaving a conversation that had the texture of two people finding each other, testing a sentence, and adjusting the next one to fit, Piyush sat beside me on the couch with a glass in his hand and the slightly stunned air of a man whose two worlds are in the next room getting along. "She's good," I said. "Yes," he said. I looked at him. He was watching the kitchen too, watching Mira specifically, and on his face was a thing I recognized, the specific helpless attention of a man who cannot quite believe his luck and is afraid that examining it too closely will make it go away. "She knows," I said low. He didn't pretend not to understand. That was new in him, and I marked it. The old Piyush would have bought himself a second with a nose what? "No," he said. "Some things. Not everything. Not everything." I nodded. I had thought about this in advance, knowing it would come, and I had decided what I felt before I had to perform feeling it. "It doesn't matter," I said. "It really doesn't. What's between you and her is yours to shape. You don't owe her a museum of your whole history on the 3rd month. You owe her honesty going forward. That's a different thing, and you can give her that." He looked at me with the expression I'd seen on him 100 times this year, the one trying to calculate the depth of what I was telling him, whether it was the real floor or just a floor I'd painted on for his comfort. "Thank you," he said, "for everything the 2 words could be made to hold." "Stop that," I said. "Cook the dal tomorrow. You promised." He laughed, the tension going out of his shoulders all at once. "I didn't promise." "You implied it. In Bengaluru on the phone. You said, and I quote, 'I make a dal now, Bia, you wouldn't believe it.' That is a promise in all but grammar." "It's a good dal," he said, defensive and pleased. "Prove it." The 4 days of the visit had a completely different quality from any visit that had come before, and the difference was not only the obvious one, that the charge was gone, that no one in the flat was holding a current. The difference was Mira and what Mira did to the geometry simply by being a 4th point in it. For 7 months, the geometry had been a triangle, and triangles are unstable. A triangle is always 2 against 1 waiting to happen, always a tension looking for somewhere to resolve. A 4th point makes a different shape. It makes a thing you can actually live inside. With Mira, there we were no longer 3 people each privately tracking the other 2. We were 4 people in a flat at Diwali, and the ordinary arithmetic of 4, pairs forming and dissolving, conversations splitting and recombining, gave everyone somewhere to put their attention that wasn't the old wound. The thing I had not predicted, the thing I should have predicted, knowing who my wife is, was how completely and naturally Saloni turned toward Mira. Not with warmth only, with something more considered than warmth. With the full attention she reserved for things that mattered, the attention I had watched her give to a length of fabric or a problem in a design, or lately, to me. By the 2nd day, they were laughing together in a way that required no audience and admitted none, the laughter of people building a private grammar. By the 3rd, Saloni had taken Mira to the fabric market, Lajpat Nagar, the same lanes the rose-dark silk had come from, though I don't think she planned the symmetry, and come back with something she'd bought specifically to show her, a cotton block print she unrolled across the bed for Mira with the particular pleasure of a person sharing the thing they love with someone who has turned out to be able to see it. I was not on that outing. I had been invited lightly and had declined lightly because I understood that the outing was theirs and that my best contribution to it was my absence. When they came back, flushed from the November cold and the crowd, both talking at once about a shop and a man and a price they had jointly defeated, I felt a thing I had not expected to feel watching my wife befriend my brother's girlfriend. I felt glad.
Plainly, uncomplicated lykklar.
The shape was getting more populated and more stable and more alive, and I was inside it rather than bracing against it. On the fourth morning, I came into the kitchen to find them both at the table with chai, deep in a conversation that had clearly been running for some time before I arrived, the conversation of two women who have found in each other something neither was looking for, and both, it turns out, needed. They didn't stop when I came in. That was the marker. A month ago, 3 months ago, conversations would have adjusted around my arrival, made room, changed key. This one simply absorbed me. Saloni pushed the third cup toward the empty chair without breaking her sentence, and I sat down inside it and was, for a little while, a fourth voice in a thing that had started without me and didn't mind that I'd joined. Piyush came in behind me, hair flat from sleep, and saw it. The three of us at the table, his girlfriend and his brother and Saloni, all folded into one easy morning. Something in him relaxed that had been held tight since the moment they'd arrived. A held breath I hadn't fully registered. He was holding until I watched it go.
He made the dal that night.
It was, against my expectations, and to my genuine surprise, very good. I told him so, and he was insufferable about it for the rest of the evening, and I let him be, because a younger brother who is insufferable about his dal is a younger brother who is, by every measure that matters, all right. On the night of Diwali itself, the flat filled with light. Saloni did the diyas the way her mother had taught her. She told me this once, years ago, in passing, and I had not understood until this year that almost everything she did with her hands was something a dead woman had taught her. A specific order. A specific under-the-breath prayer. The small clay lamp set along the windowsills and the balcony ledge, and the threshold one most important of all, the light at the door that says to whatever is passing in the dark, "Here is a house, come in, you are welcome." Mira helped her. I watched the two of them move along the ledge with a box of diyas between them, Saloni pouring the oil, Mira setting the wicks, the older woman teaching the younger without ever making a lesson of it, like this, "See, not too much oil or it drowns," and Mira nodding, taking it in, the way she took everything in, for keeping. Piyush and I did the string lights, which is to say Piyush held the ladder and issued instructions, and I did the actual work, which is the correct and ancient division of labor between an older brother and a younger one, and felt, that night, like a kind of homecoming. We had strung lights together as boys. We had not done it as men. Somewhere in the years we'd stopped, the way you stop doing the small shared things and don't notice the stopping. There was a moment, me on the ladder and him below with his hand on the rail steadying it, when I looked down at the top of his head and felt the whole length of our shared life telescope shut. The boy who'd cried at cartoons and hidden a cat in his hostel room. The man holding a ladder for me on a Diwali balcony in the flat where his life and mine and Saloni's had collided and somehow not destroyed each other. And I had to look back up at the wire quickly before my face did something I wasn't ready to explain. When it was all lit, we stood back. The four of us crowded onto the small balcony and looked at what we'd made. The whole colony was doing the same thing. Every balcony outlined in light, the dark between them dense with it, and over the rooftops the first fireworks had started, the early eager ones, the sky beginning its long noisy argument with itself. Mira stepped away to call her parents in Mysore. I watched her at the far end of the balcony with the phone to her ear, her face shifting into its daughter version, younger and softer and unguarded in a way I hadn't seen it. And I thought about all the families feeding into this one improvised gathering, hers in Mysore, ours in Nagpur, Saloni's mother 15 years gone but present in the order of the diyas, in the prayer her daughter's hands still remembered, without being told. That is what a festival is, I think, a confluence. Everyone arrives carrying their dead and their distant, and for one night the light is asked to hold all of it, and somehow does. Saloni came and stood beside me. She didn't say anything. She put a sparkler in my hand, already lit, and held one of her own, and we stood there with our small, fierce, private fireworks spitting white in the dark while the big ones went off over the city, and she leaned her shoulder into mine, and I thought, this. Whatever this is, whatever it doesn't have a name for, this. Late that night, after Mira and Piyush had gone to bed, they took the guest room together with an ordinariness that I noted and then, deliberately, stopped noting, because the noting was a habit from an older self. Saloni and I sat on the balcony in the dark. The lights were still up along the railing, the small ones, throwing their warm, unsteady glow on the two of us, and on the diyas Saloni had set along the ledge, most of them guttered out now, one or two still going. Below us the colony was winding down from the festival, the last of the firecrackers somewhere streets away, the smell of cordite and sweets and cold air mixing into the specific smell of a Delhi Diwali night. She's good for him, Saloni said. Yes. She sees him clearly. A pause, and then, more slowly, working it out as she said it. That's the rare thing. Not seeing someone clearly. Lots of people see clearly. The rare thing is seeing clearly and staying anyway. For most people, the clarity is what makes them leave. I looked at her profile in the unsteady light. The strong line of her nose, the loose hair, the cup held in both hands at her chest for the warmth. I know someone like that, I said. She turned, looked at me. Two people, actually, I said. I meant it two ways, and she heard both. I meant Mira, who saw my brother clearly and was staying. And I meant her, Saloni, who had been seen this year more clearly than she had ever let herself be seen by me, who had learned things about her that no comparable marriage ever requires you to learn, and who had stayed, and who had also, in her own way, seen me clearly, seen the worst of what the year had made possible in me, and the best of what it had made actual, and had stayed for that too. The city went on below us. The fading Diwali lights, the diya flames bending in the small wind. The particular quiet of four people in a flat at the end of a long good day, two of them asleep, and two of them awake on a balcony, not needing to fill the silence. She leaned her head on my shoulder, the weight of it, familiar now, chosen. This is good, she said. This thing we are now. I keep waiting to find the catch in it, and there isn't one. It's just good. Yes, I said. It is. We stayed out until the cold one. Before we went in, she leaned over and pinched out the last two diyas with her fingers, wetting them first to her lips, the small, competent gesture of a woman who has been ending Diwali nights this way her whole life, and the flames went out under her fingers without complaint, and the balcony went dark, and the lights along the railing were all that was left, throwing their warm net over the place where we had been sitting. Later, in bed, I wrote one line in the notebook by the light of the phone, quietly, so as not to wake her. Diwali. For points now, not 3. A shape you can live inside. She said, I keep waiting for the catch, and there isn't one. I didn't tell her. The absence of the catch is the catch. It's the thing that takes the most getting used to. Being simply happy, with no tax on it. We are learning even that. I put the notebook in the drawer and lay in the dark and listened to the flat breathe, my wife beside me, My brother and the woman he would marry in the next room. The dia smell still faintly in the air, and I thought that if the man on the plastic stool a year ago could have seen this room on this night, he would not have believed it, and he would have been wrong not to. To be continued in episode 13. What Mira noticed.
Simbolo di copyright Mia.
All rights reserved. That was episode 12 of My Playful Wife. If this story is staying with you, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus bonus chapters are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
I've Mia.
Thank you for listening.